My daughter Megan surprised me with a first-class train ticket from Portland to New Orleans. She said it was time I stopped grieving and started living again. She drove me to Union Station, held me tight on the platform, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear in her eyes. Then she was gone. As I stepped toward Track 7, a stranger blocked my path. "Sir, if you value your life, don't get on that train," he said. What he told me next shattered everything I believed about my family. My wife hadn't just died of her disease. Someone had made sure she died faster. Hello everyone, and welcome. Before we dive into the story, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from in the world. I truly enjoy seeing how these stories connect people everywhere. Just a quick reminder, some elements in this story have been dramatized to enhance the emotional experience. Any resemblance to real events is purely coincidental. Now, let me tell you what that stranger revealed to me on that cold platform at Union Station. The moment that changed the course of my entire life. My name is Robert Callahan. Most people who knew me well called me Bobby. I am 66 years old, and these days I live alone in a small log cabin tucked at the base of the Bitterroot Mountains just outside Bend, Oregon. The cabin sits on 2 quiet acres surrounded by ponderosa pines and Douglas firs that sway and whisper whenever the wind rolls down from the peaks. Most mornings I wake before sunrise and sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee, listening to the creek that runs behind the property. The air out here is cool and clean, the kind that fills your lungs and reminds you that you are still breathing, still alive, still here. It is peaceful in a way I never imagined I would need. But 1 year ago, my life looked very different. Back then, I was 65, and every morning I woke up in the same house I had shared with my wife Helen for more than 40 years. We bought that house together in 1984, the year after we got married. It stood on a quiet tree-lined block in the Alberta Arts District of Northeast Portland. A 2-story craftsman with cedar shingles, a wide front porch, and a backyard where Helen planted hydrangeas along the fence every spring. Helen loved that house. She loved the way morning light came through the kitchen window and landed on the counter where she kept her collection of jazz vinyl records. She must have owned close to 200 of them. Miles Davis, Billie Holiday, Chet Baker, John Coltrane. Every Sunday morning without fail, she would slide a record from its sleeve, set it gently on the turntable, and fill the house with music. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sound of a trumpet or a saxophone became the heartbeat of our home. I met Helen in the spring of 1982. I was 24 years old and working as a pediatrician at a small clinic in southeast Portland. She was 23, a music teacher at a public elementary school across the river. We met at a jazz festival in Waterfront Park on a Saturday afternoon in May. I was standing near one of the smaller stages, listening to a quartet play something slow and warm, when I noticed a woman standing a few feet away. She had dark hair pulled loosely over one shoulder and a wide, easy smile that seemed to glow even in the shade. She caught me looking. Instead of turning away, she smiled directly at me and said, "You look like someone who actually listens to the music instead of just standing near it." I laughed. We started talking. 2 hours later, we were still standing in that same spot. The festival swirling around us, neither of us wanting to leave. 4 months later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes, before I even finished the question. We were married in October of 1983 at a small chapel in the Columbia River Gorge, with autumn leaves falling like confetti around us. For our honeymoon, we took a train from Portland all the way to New Orleans. It was Helen's idea. She had always dreamed of walking through the French Quarter, listening to live jazz drifting out of open doorways, eating beignets at Café du Monde, while watching the Mississippi River slide past in the late afternoon light. And that is exactly what we did. For 7 days, we wandered through the narrow streets of the French Quarter, hand in hand. We sat in smoky jazz clubs where the music wrapped around us like something alive. One evening, we found a tiny cafe on Royal Street with wrought iron balconies and a single trumpet player standing outside, playing a melody so beautiful that Helen stopped walking and stood perfectly still with tears running down her cheeks. "Bobby," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Promise me we will come back here someday." "I promise," I told her. I meant it with everything I had. But life has a way of moving forward without asking permission. Years passed. Decades passed. Our daughter Megan was born in 1990. I built my medical practice. Helen continued teaching music to children who adored her. The house on Alberta Street filled with laughter and noise, and the sound of Helen's records spinning on Sunday mornings. We were happy. Deeply. Quietly. Completely happy. And we never made it back to New Orleans. Helen used to keep a small collection of travel brochures in the drawer beside her bed. Most of them were about Louisiana. The French Quarter walking tours, steamboat cruises on the Mississippi, jazz heritage festivals. Sometimes at night, she would pull one out and flip through the pages, folding down corners where a photograph caught her eye. A saxophone player on a street corner, a balcony draped in iron lace, the wide brown river glowing at sunset. "Someday, Bobby," she would say softly, looking at me over the top of the brochure. "Someday we will go back." But someday never arrived. Instead, something else came first. Something none of us saw coming. Something that would begin to unravel everything. It began in the autumn of 2019. Small things at first. Things so ordinary that I told myself they meant nothing. Helen misplaced her car keys one Tuesday morning and spent 45 minutes searching the house before I found them sitting inside the refrigerator, resting on the shelf next to a carton of milk. She laughed about it. I laughed about it too. Everybody forgets things, I thought. We were both in our early 60s. It was normal, but then it happened again. And again. She forgot the name of the grocery store she had been shopping at for 30 years. She left the stove burner running twice in 1 week. She called our daughter Megan by my name once, then corrected herself quickly and waved it off. One evening I found her standing in the hallway between the bedroom and the bathroom, perfectly still, staring at the wall with a blank expression, as though she had forgotten where she was going. "Helen," I said gently. "Are you okay?" She turned to me slowly. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, there was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Confusion. Not the ordinary kind that passes quickly, but something deeper, something frightened. Then it was gone, and she smiled and said, "I was just thinking about something." Lost my train of thought. I wanted to believe her. So I did. By December, the signs had grown harder to ignore. Helen repeated the same story 3 times during dinner with Arthur Yee and his wife without realizing it. She struggled to remember the name of a song she had been playing on her turntable for decades. One Sunday morning, she stood in front of her vinyl collection, running her fingers along the record sleeves, and whispered, "Bobby, which one is the one I love?" She meant Chet Baker. She had played that album every Sunday for as long as I could remember. I made the appointment the next day. Dr. Evelyn Santos, a neurologist at Oregon Health and Science University, ran a full battery of tests over the course of 2 weeks. Cognitive assessments, brain imaging, blood panels, everything. When the results came back, we sat together in her office on a rainy January morning in 2020. Helen held my hand tightly beneath the desk. "Mrs. Callahan," Dr. Santos said carefully, "the results indicate early-stage Alzheimer's disease." The room went silent. Rain streaked down the window behind the doctor's desk. Helen's grip on my hand tightened until her knuckles turned white. She didn't cry. She just sat there, perfectly still, staring at the doctor, as though she were trying to memorize the words before her mind could take them away. That night, after we came home, Helen sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she never drank. The house was quiet. Her jazz records sat untouched on the shelf. After a long silence, she looked at me and said, "Promise me something, Bobby. Anything." I said, "Don't put me in a facility." Let me stay in this house. Let me stay with you. I promise, I said. And I kept that promise. Every single day. For the next 3 years. The progression was slow at first. Helen forgot small things, appointments, conversations, where she had placed her reading glasses. But she was still Helen. She still laughed at my terrible jokes. She still hummed along when I played her records. She still sat in the garden on warm afternoons, watching the hydrangeas bloom along the fence. Our daughter Megan visited regularly during those early months. She lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, with her husband Tyler Shaw. Tyler was 35 at the time. A financial consultant who worked for a large investment firm. He was tall, well-groomed, and carried himself with the polished confidence of a man who was used to being in control of every room he entered. Megan had married him in 2016, and 2 years later they had a daughter, our granddaughter, Lily. Tyler was charming. There was no other word for it. He shook my hand firmly every time he visited. He brought flowers for Helen. He asked about my practice, about the house, about the garden. He remembered details from previous conversations and brought them up naturally as though he genuinely cared. When Helen's condition began to worsen, Tyler offered to help. "Bobby," he said one afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table while Helen napped upstairs. "You can't do this alone. Let me help. I can come up on weekends, give you a break, sit with Helen, handle the medications." I was grateful. Truly grateful. Caring for Helen full-time was exhausting in ways I had never anticipated. The medication schedule alone was complicated. Multiple prescriptions at different times of day, each with specific dosages and instructions. Tyler began managing the evening doses whenever he visited. He would sit beside Helen on the couch, carefully counting out her pills, placing them in her palm one at a time, and handing her a glass of water with a gentle smile. "Here you go, Mom," he would say softly. Helen would smile back at him every time. "Thank you, Tyler," she would whisper. "You're such a good boy." He did this every single visit without fail. For nearly 2 years, by 2022, Helen's decline had accelerated sharply. Dr. Santos used the phrase unusually aggressive progression during one of our appointments. She said that while every case was different, the speed of Helen's cognitive deterioration was faster than what the initial assessments had predicted. She adjusted the treatment plan, added new medications, recommended additional specialist consultations. None of it seemed to help. Helen forgot Megan's name. She forgot our anniversary. She forgot how to operate the turntable she had used for 40 years. One morning in the fall of 2022, she looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Excuse me, sir. Do you know where my husband is?" I set down my coffee cup. My hands were shaking. "It's me, Helen," I said quietly. "It's Bobby." She studied my face for a long moment. Then something shifted behind her eyes, a flicker of recognition, faint and trembling like a candle in the wind. "Oh," she whispered. "Bobby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Don't apologize," I said. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." The final months were the hardest. Helen could no longer dress herself or bathe without assistance. I hired a part-time home health aide named Clara who came every morning and helped with the daily routines I could not manage alone. Megan flew in from Charlotte several times, though her visits had become shorter and less frequent. She looked tired, distracted. There were dark circles beneath her eyes that hadn't been there before. When I asked if she was all right, she always gave the same answer. "I'm fine, Dad. Just busy with work." Tyler continued visiting. He continued helping with Helen's medication. He was the last person to give her the evening pills on the night before she had her final lucid moment. That moment came on a cold Wednesday afternoon in early March of 2023. Clara had gone home for the day. I was sitting beside Helen's bed, reading aloud from a book of poetry she used to love, when suddenly her hand reached out and grasped mine with a strength that startled me. I looked up. Her eyes were clear, focused, present. For the first time in months, Helen was fully there. "Bobby," she said. Her voice was thin but steady. "I'm here," I said. She looked at me with an expression so sharp and so filled with love that it broke something deep inside my chest. "Take care of our girl, Bobby," she whispered. "Promise me, you will take care of our girl." I squeezed her hand. "I promise, Helen. I promise." She smiled. It was the last real smile I ever saw on her face. 3 days later, on a quiet Saturday morning while the March rain fell against the windows of our house on Alberta Street, Helen passed away in her sleep. She was 64 years old. We had shared 41 years together. More than half of my entire life. Tyler stood at her funeral, with tears rolling down his face. His arm wrapped around Megan's shoulders, looking every bit like the devoted son-in-law everyone believed him to be. After the funeral, the house on Alberta Street became a different place. It still stood exactly as it always had. Cedar shingles darkened by decades of Portland rain. Hydrangeas sleeping in the winter soil along the back fence. The wide front porch where Helen and I used to sit together on summer evenings watching the neighborhood go quiet. Nothing had physically changed. But everything felt wrong. The silence was the worst part. For 41 years, that house had never been truly quiet. Even in the late hours, there had always been something. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the hallway clock, the soft rhythm of Helen's breathing beside me in the dark. Now the silence felt permanent. It pressed against the walls like something solid. I kept Helen's things exactly where she had left them. Her reading glasses still rested on the nightstand beside the bed. Her favorite cardigan, the soft gray one with the pearl buttons, hung over the back of the kitchen chair, as though she had just draped it there on her way to make tea. The jazz records lined the shelf in the living room in the same order she had arranged them years ago, alphabetical by artist, each sleeve worn soft at the edges from decades of handling. I could not move any of it. Touching those things felt like disturbing, something sacred, as if rearranging a single record sleeve or folding that cardigan would somehow erase the last proof that she had been there at all. So I left everything in place, and I lived around it. The weeks turned into months. I developed a routine because routine was the only thing that kept me from falling apart. Every Tuesday I drove to the grocery store on Fremont Street. Every Saturday morning I swept the porch and checked the garden. Every Sunday I played one of Helen's records on the turntable, the same way she used to. And I sat in the living room alone, listening to the music fill the empty house. My old friend Arthur Yee checked on me often. Arthur had been my closest friend for nearly 40 years. We had met back in 1985 when his pharmacy was located 2 blocks from my pediatric clinic. He was a sharp, blunt-spoken man with wire-rimmed glasses and a dry sense of humor that could catch you off guard if you weren't paying attention. After his wife passed away from a stroke 6 years earlier, Arthur understood loneliness in a way that most people didn't. He came by the house at least twice a week, usually without calling first. He would knock on the door, let himself in, and sit at the kitchen table drinking the terrible instant coffee I kept in the cupboard. "Bobby, this coffee is an insult to human civilization," he said one afternoon, grimacing as he took a sip. "Then stop drinking it," I replied. "Can't. Someone has to make sure you're still alive in here." Arthur never told me to move on. He never suggested I should clean out Helen's belongings or sell the house. He just showed up. He sat with me. He let the silence be what it was. And sometimes, that was exactly what I needed. Megan called from Charlotte about once a week. The conversations were always short. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine. She told me about Lily, about work, about the weather in North Carolina. The calls rarely lasted more than 10 minutes. She almost never mentioned Tyler. I told myself she was busy. She had a demanding career. She was raising a 5-year-old daughter. She lived across the country. It made sense that she couldn't visit often. I understood that. At least I thought I did. But the visits had changed. Before Helen's illness, Megan used to fly to Portland 3 or 4 times a year. She would stay for a long weekend, sometimes a full week. She and Helen would spend hours in the kitchen together, cooking, laughing, playing music for Lily. Those visits were the heartbeat of our family. After Helen's death, Megan came twice in 6 months. Both times, she stayed for only 2 days. Both times, she seemed distracted, distant, and rushed. The only true joy I had during those months was Lily. Whenever Megan did visit, Lily would burst through the front door like a small hurricane, her brown curls bouncing, her arms wide open. "Grandpa!" she would shout, running straight into my legs and wrapping her tiny arms around me as tightly as she could. She was 5 years old and completely fearless. She wanted to see the garden. She wanted to play with the record player. She wanted me to read her the same picture book 3 times in a row. For those few hours when Lily was in the house, the silence disappeared. The rooms felt alive again, and I could almost pretend, just for a moment, that everything was still whole. But those moments were rare. One evening in late January of 2024, I called Megan. It was around 8 o'clock Portland time, which meant it was 11 at night in Charlotte. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was hushed, almost a whisper. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. In the background, I heard something. A man's voice, sharp and clipped. "Tyler." He was saying something I couldn't fully make out, but the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't a conversation. It was a command. "Megan?" I said. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, Dad. Everything's fine." Her voice was tight, controlled. I have to go. Tyler needs me for something." "Megan." "Wait. Is he? I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "I love you, Dad. Good night." The line went dead. I sat in the kitchen holding the phone against my chest, staring at the dark window. Something about that call bothered me. The whispering, the way she had said his name, the sharp voice in the background cutting through the quiet like glass breaking. But I told myself it was nothing. Every couple argued. Tyler worked long hours. Megan was tired. They had a young daughter. Stress was normal. Tension was normal. I set the phone down on the table and poured myself a glass of water. Outside, the Portland rain tapped steadily against the windows. The house was silent again. Looking back now, I understand that every missed phone call, every short visit, every excuse Megan made for not staying longer was not her pulling away from me. It was someone pulling her away, someone tightening his grip around her life, slowly, carefully. The way you tighten a knot so gradually that the person caught inside it doesn't realize they can no longer move until it is far too late. But I didn't see it then. I was too deep inside my own grief to notice that my daughter was drowning right in front of me. On the first Saturday of March, 2024, my doorbell rang just after 6 in the evening. I wasn't expecting anyone. Arthur usually came by during the afternoons, and Megan hadn't mentioned any plans to visit. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, set down the pot of soup I had been stirring on the stove, and walked to the front door. When I opened it, Lily was the first thing I saw. She stood on the porch in a bright red coat, her brown curls tangled from wind, her face lit up with the kind of smile that only a 5-year-old can produce without effort. "Grandpa!" she shouted, and launched herself into my arms before I even had time to crouch down. I caught her and lifted her up, and she wrapped her small arms around my neck so tightly that I could feel her heartbeat against my chest. Behind her stood Megan and Tyler. Megan wore a dark green jacket, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her eyes were slightly red, as though she had been crying recently. But she smiled when she saw me. It was a careful smile. Controlled. Tyler stood beside her in a charcoal overcoat and polished shoes, one hand resting lightly on Megan's lower back. He looked composed, confident, exactly the way he always looked. "Hey, Dad," Megan said softly. "Surprise. What are you all doing here?" I asked, still holding Lily on my hip. "You didn't tell me you were coming. That's the point of a surprise, Bobby," Tyler said with a grin. He stepped forward and shook my hand firmly. "Mind if we come in?" I led them inside. Lily immediately ran to the living room and started flipping through the picture books I kept on the bottom shelf for her. Megan went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood near the window, looking out at the backyard. Tyler sat at the kitchen table and unbuttoned his coat. He looked relaxed, but there was a sharpness behind his eyes that I noticed only because I happened to glance at him at the right moment. It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "Something smells good," Tyler said, nodding toward the stove. "Just soup," I replied. "Nothing fancy. Are you hungry? I can set extra places." "Actually," Tyler said, reaching into the inside pocket of his coat, "we came here for a reason." He pulled out a long white envelope and slid it across the kitchen table toward me. Megan turned from the window. She was watching me now, her hands clasped tightly together in front of her body. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," Tyler said. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out the contents. 2 printed documents. The first was a train ticket, Amtrak Coast Starlight and Sunset Limited, first-class sleeper car, Portland Union Station to New Orleans. Departure date, March 14th, 2024. The second document was a hotel reservation, a boutique hotel in the French Quarter. 5 nights. A room with a balcony overlooking Royal Street. Royal Street. The same street where Helen and I had stood 40 years ago, listening to a trumpet player whose melody had made her cry. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the documents, reading the words over and over, as though they might rearrange themselves into something different. "We know Mom always wanted to go back," Megan said quietly from across the kitchen. Her voice cracked slightly. "We thought maybe it was time." Tyler nodded. "You deserve this, Bobby. After everything you've been through, Helen would have wanted you to take this trip." I looked up from the tickets. Megan's eyes were wet. She pressed her lips together tightly, the way people do when they are trying very hard not to cry. Tyler watched me with that same composed expression. His head tilted slightly to one side. "This is too much," I managed. "The cost alone." "Don't worry about the cost," Tyler interrupted smoothly. "Consider it a gift. From your family." I looked down at the tickets again. New Orleans. The French Quarter. Royal Street. The city where Helen and I had begun our life together. The city she had dreamed about returning to for 40 years. The city we never made it back to. And suddenly, something broke open inside me. I felt my chest tighten and my vision blur. And before I could stop it, tears were streaming down my face. I hadn't cried like that since the morning Helen died. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten breakfast alone for the past year, and I wept. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at me with wide, worried eyes. "Grandpa, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart," I said, wiping my face. "I'm happy. These are happy tears." She studied me for a moment, uncertain. Then she walked over, climbed into my lap, and pressed her small, warm hand against my cheek. "Don't cry, Grandpa," she said softly. "It's okay." I held her close and breathed in the scent of her hair, something like strawberry shampoo and crayons. For the first time in a year, I felt something I had forgotten how to feel. Hope. It was fragile and cautious, like the first green shoot pushing through cold soil in early spring. But it was real. Megan walked around the table and wrapped her arms around me from behind. She held on tightly, too tightly. Her whole body trembled against my back. I could feel her breath, quick and shallow, against the side of my neck. "Dad," she whispered. "I love you so much. You know that, right?" "I know, sweetheart," I said. "I love you too." She held on for a long time, longer than she ever had before. Then Tyler cleared his throat softly from across the table. "Megan," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something firm. Megan released me slowly. She straightened up, wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand, and stepped away. "We should get going," she said. "Lily has school tomorrow, and our flight back to Charlotte is early." They left 20 minutes later. I stood on the porch holding Lily one last time while Megan carried their bags to the rental car. Tyler shook my hand at the door. "Enjoy the trip, Bobby," he said. "You've earned it." I watched them drive away until the taillights disappeared around the corner. The house was quiet again. I turned to go inside, and that is when I noticed it. Megan's scarf. A soft blue wool scarf draped over the back of the kitchen chair where she had been sitting. She must have forgotten it. I picked it up and held it for a moment, breathing in the faint smell of her perfume. As I folded it, a small piece of paper slipped out from inside and fluttered to the floor. I bent down and picked it up. It was a torn square of notebook paper, creased as though it had been folded and unfolded many times. On it, in Megan's handwriting, were 2 words. "I'm sorry." I stared at those 2 words for a long time. I told myself she was apologizing for not visiting more often, for being too busy, for not being there when I needed her most. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my shirt pocket, close to my heart. I had no idea those 2 words carried a weight I could not yet comprehend. The next morning I woke before sunrise, and for the first time in over a year, I did not lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point of the day was. I got up. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with the train ticket and hotel confirmation spread out in front of me, and I read every detail again. Portland to Los Angeles on the Coast Starlight. Los Angeles to New Orleans on the Sunset Limited. First-class sleeper car. Private room with a fold-down bed and a wide window. Meals included. I was going to watch the entire country pass by my window. Mountains, deserts, rivers, small towns. And at the end of it all, New Orleans would be waiting. That afternoon I drove to the outdoor store on Hawthorne Boulevard and spent nearly 2 hours picking out travel essentials. A lightweight jacket with deep pockets, comfortable walking shoes, a small day pack for exploring the French Quarter, a portable phone charger, a thin money belt to keep my passport and cash secure beneath my shirt. The young woman at the register asked where I was headed. "New Orleans," I told her. Her face brightened. "Oh, you're going to love it. The food alone is worth the trip." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had given a stranger in months. The following day I stopped by the bookstore on 23rd Avenue and bought a thick travel guide about New Orleans and the Louisiana Bayou country. The pages were filled with photographs that made my pulse quicken. The iron lace balconies of the French Quarter draped in green ferns. Streetcars rolling past rows of colorful shotgun houses. Saxophone players standing on street corners, with their instrument cases open at their feet. The wide, slow-moving Mississippi glowing amber and gold in the late afternoon sun. Every evening that week I sat at the kitchen table and turned those pages slowly. I imagined walking those same streets Helen and I had walked 40 years ago. I pictured myself sitting at Café du Monde, ordering beignets and chicory coffee, watching the river barges drift past just the way we had done on our honeymoon. I even imagined finding that little cafe on Royal Street where the trumpet player had made Helen cry. I called Arthur to tell him about the trip. "Well, it's about damn time somebody got you out of this house," Arthur said. I could hear him grinning through the phone. "Helen would be thrilled. She'd probably haunt you if you didn't go." "That sounds like something she would do," I said, laughing. "Bobby," Arthur said, his tone softening slightly. "I mean it. This is good. This is really good. You need this. I know, I said. I think I do. But looking back now, there were details that week I should have questioned. Small moments that didn't quite fit. I was too excited to notice them at the time. Too wrapped up in the anticipation of the trip to pay attention to what was happening right in front of me. Tyler flew in from Charlotte twice that week. He said he had business meetings in Portland and wanted to stop by to help me prepare for the trip. Both visits felt slightly off. The first time, he arrived on a Tuesday evening. He helped me organize my suitcase, checked that my passport was current, and reviewed the train schedule with me. But the entire time he was in the house, his phone kept buzzing. Every few minutes he would glance down at the screen, read something quickly, and slide the phone back into his pocket without responding. His leg bounced constantly. His jaw was clenched tight. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said quickly. "Just work. You know how it is." The second visit was on Thursday, 2 days before the departure. Tyler arrived in the late afternoon and stayed for about an hour. This time, he seemed even more distracted. He paced the living room while I showed him the travel guide. His eyes kept drifting toward the window, as though he were watching for something outside. At one point, I caught him standing in the hallway near Helen's old bedroom, looking at his phone with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It wasn't stress. It was something darker. Something that looked almost like dread. "Tyler," I said from the kitchen doorway. "Are you sure everything is all right?" He turned quickly and slid the phone into his pocket. "Yeah, Bobby. Absolutely." He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just making sure everything is perfect for your trip." I let it go. On Wednesday evening, the night between Tyler's 2 visits, my phone rang at 11:45 at night. I was already in bed, half asleep. I fumbled for the phone on the nightstand and saw Megan's name on the screen. "Megan?" I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "It's almost midnight." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Quick, shallow breaths, like she had been running or crying. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "Megan, what is it? Are you okay?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then she spoke again, still whispering. "Dad, I love you. You know that, right? No matter what happens, you know I love you." A chill ran through me. "Of course I know that. Megan, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" I heard a sound in the background, a door opening. Footsteps. "I have to go," she said quickly. "I'm sorry, Dad. Just please be safe on your trip. Promise me you'll be safe." "Megan, wait." The line went dead. I lay in the dark for a long time after that call, staring at the ceiling, my heart beating too fast. Something was wrong. I could feel it, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't know how to ask without sounding paranoid. The night before the trip, I walked slowly through the house one last time. I paused in the living room and looked at Helen's jazz records lined up on the shelf. I ran my fingers gently along the spines the way she used to. Then I stopped in front of the framed photograph on the mantel. Our wedding day, 1983. Helen in her simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. Me in a borrowed suit, grinning like a fool. I picked up the photograph and held it close. "We're going back, Helen," I whispered. "After all these years, I'm finally going back to New Orleans. Just like you always wanted." I set the photograph down carefully and went to bed. That night, I lay awake for a long time, feeling something I hadn't experienced since before Helen got sick. Excitement, anticipation, a fragile, cautious kind of happiness, like holding something made of glass. I had no idea it would be the last peaceful night I would have for a very long time. My alarm went off at 4 in the morning. I had barely slept. I had spent most of the night lying awake in the dark, my mind cycling between excitement and a vague uneasiness I could not name. By the time the alarm sounded, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, fully awake, my suitcase packed and standing by the bedroom door. I showered, dressed in the travel clothes I had laid out the night before, and went downstairs. The kitchen was cold and dim. I made a pot of coffee and drank 1 cup standing at the counter, looking out through the window at the dark backyard, where Helen's hydrangeas lay dormant beneath the March soil. The house was silent. The only sound was the steady tick of the hallway clock and the faint rumble of rain on the roof. At 4:50, headlights swept across the front windows. I heard a car pull into the driveway, the engine idling for a moment before it shut off. One door opened and closed. Just one. I went to the front door and opened it. Megan stood on the porch alone. She wore a dark jacket, jeans, and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back tightly. Her face looked pale under the porch light, and her eyes were swollen and rimmed with red, as though she had been crying for hours. "Morning, Dad," she said. Her voice was hoarse. I looked past her toward the car. The passenger seat was empty. The back seat was empty. "Where's Tyler?" I asked. Megan didn't look at me when she answered. "He had a work emergency," she said flatly. "Something came up last night. He couldn't make it. He flew all the way from Charlotte. And he can't drive me to the station? He sends his apologies." She bent down and picked up my suitcase before I could reach for it. "We should go, Dad. Your train leaves at 6:30. Something about her tone stopped me from pressing further. It was the same controlled, careful voice she had used on the phone those past few months. The voice of someone measuring every word before letting it out. I locked the front door, took one last glance at the house, and followed her to the car. The drive to Union Station took about 20 minutes. Megan drove in silence, both hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. The wipers swept back and forth across the windshield, pushing the rain aside in slow, rhythmic strokes. Portland was still asleep. The streets were dark and empty, the traffic lights cycling through their colors for no one. I tried to fill the silence. "I was reading in the guidebook about this jazz club on Frenchman Street," I said. "It's supposed to be one of the best in the city. Live music every night. I thought I might check it out on the second evening." Megan nodded but said nothing. "And there's a riverboat dinner cruise on the Mississippi," I continued. 2 hours at sunset. The photographs looked incredible. "That sounds nice, Dad." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I looked at her. In the pale glow of the dashboard lights, I could see that her jaw was clenched tight. A single tear had escaped from the corner of her left eye and was tracing a slow path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't seem to notice it at all. "Megan," I said softly. "Talk to me. What's going on?" "Nothing." She swallowed hard. "I'm just tired. You've been crying." "I'm fine, Dad. Please." The way she said please made me stop. There was something in that single word, something raw and desperate, like a person standing at the edge of something terrible and begging not to be pushed. I didn't ask again. We pulled into the drop-off lane at Union Station just after 5:20. The station was beautiful even in the pre-dawn darkness. The old brick building with its tall clock tower rose against the gray sky, its warm interior lights glowing through the arched windows. A few early travelers moved through the entrance, pulling suitcases and carrying coffee cups. Megan parked the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, both hands still on the wheel, staring straight ahead at the rain streaking down the windshield. "Megan," I said gently. She took a breath, then another. Then she opened her door and stepped out into the rain without grabbing an umbrella. I got out and met her at the trunk. She had already lifted my suitcase out and set it on the curb. The rain was falling steadily now, soaking through her jacket, flattening her hair against her head. She didn't seem to care. We walked into the station together. The interior was grand and warm. High ceilings with dark wooden beams, polished tile floors, old-fashioned benches lining the walls. A departure board hung on the far wall, clicking softly as train times updated. I checked the board. Amtrak train number 11, Coast Starlight, Portland to Los Angeles. Departure 6:30, track 7. On time. Megan walked beside me toward the platform entrance. She hadn't spoken since we got out of the car. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. Her lips were pressed together in a thin, trembling line. We reached the entrance to track 7. The platform stretched ahead of us, long and narrow, with the silver body of the train waiting alongside it. Steam drifted from beneath the cars. A conductor stood near the first-class sleeper, checking tickets. I turned to say goodbye. Before I could speak, Megan stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. She held on with a force that startled me. Her whole body was shaking. Her face pressed against my shoulder, and I could feel the wetness of her tears soaking through my jacket. She gripped the back of my coat with both fists, as though she were afraid I might disappear if she let go. "Megan," I whispered. "Megan, what is it?" "I love you, Dad." Her voice broke completely. "No matter what happens, please remember that I love you. Please. Promise me." "I promise," I said, my heart hammering. "Megan, please tell me what's wrong." She pulled back. Her face was a wreck of tears and rain and something I can only describe as terror. She looked into my eyes for one long, desperate moment, and I saw it clearly. Fear. Not sadness. Not exhaustion. Pure, unmistakable fear. "Be safe, Dad," she choked out. "Please, please be safe." Then she turned and walked away. Fast. Almost running. She pushed through the station doors and disappeared into the rain-soaked parking lot without looking back. "Megan!" I called out. "Megan! Wait!" She didn't stop. I stood there on the platform, my suitcase at my feet, rain dripping from the edges of the station awning overhead. My heart was pounding. My hands were trembling. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to follow her, to run after my daughter and demand to know what was happening. But I didn't. Instead, I turned toward track 7. I picked up my suitcase. I walked toward the waiting train. That was my first mistake. I stood on the platform trying to steady my breathing. The rain had softened to a light drizzle. Steam curled from beneath the train cars and drifted upward into the gray morning air. The conductor near the first-class sleeper was checking his clipboard, glancing occasionally at the passengers making their way toward the doors. I told myself to calm down. Megan was emotional. She had always been emotional. She was worried about me traveling alone, that was all. She missed her mother. We all missed her mother. The tears, the trembling, the desperate way she had clung to me, it was grief. Nothing more. I gripped the handle of my suitcase and stepped forward. The conductor looked up and smiled. "Good morning, sir." "Ticket, please." I reached into my jacket pocket, and then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was firm, but not aggressive. A calm, deliberate pressure that stopped me mid-step. I turned around. A man stood behind me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin and close-cropped hair that was graying at the temples. He wore a dark wool coat over a button-down shirt. His face was weathered in the way of someone who had lived through things that aged him beyond his years. But it was his eyes that caught me. They were steady, focused, and absolutely serious. "Sir," he said quietly. His voice carried a slight accent, warm and measured. "Please don't get on that train." I stared at him. "Excuse me? My name is Samuel Okonkwo," he said. He did not remove his hand from my shoulder. "I need to speak with you. Right now. It is urgent." "I don't know you," I said sharply. The words came out harsher than I intended. My nerves were already frayed from the morning with Megan, and now a complete stranger was standing in my way. "My train is about to leave. I understand that," Samuel said. His tone remained perfectly even. "And I would not be standing here if it were not a matter of life and death." He paused. "Your life." The words landed like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Something in his expression, the unwavering directness of it, the complete absence of hesitation, pinned me where I stood. 5 minutes, he said. Give me 5 minutes. If you still want to board that train after you hear what I have to say, I will step aside and never bother you again. But you deserve to hear this first. The conductor behind me shifted his weight. Sir, we'll be closing the doors in about 10 minutes. I looked at the train. I looked at Samuel. The rain drizzled softly on the platform around us. Steam drifted past our feet. 5 minutes, I said. Samuel nodded once. There is a small coffee stand inside the station, around the corner from the main hall. Please follow me. I left my suitcase with the conductor and followed Samuel back into the station. He walked with purpose, his steps measured and deliberate, leading me through the main hall and around a corner to a small espresso counter tucked beneath the staircase. A handful of early travelers sat at nearby tables, staring at their phones or sipping from paper cups. Samuel chose a table against the back wall, away from everyone. We sat down. He folded his hands on the table and looked directly at me. Up close, he looked exhausted. The skin beneath his eyes was dark and heavy, as though he hadn't slept. But his gaze was sharp and alert. I arrived at the station this morning around 5 o'clock. Samuel began. I am flying to San Francisco for a conference. My bus connection departs from the terminal next door. But I came into Union Station to get coffee. He gestured toward the espresso counter. I was sitting right here, he continued, tapping the table. At this table, drinking my coffee and reading. The station was nearly empty. Very quiet. He paused, as though choosing his next words carefully. At approximately 5:15, a man walked through the main entrance. Tall, mid to late 30s, well-dressed, charcoal overcoat. He walked quickly, like someone who did not want to be noticed. My chest tightened. Charcoal overcoat. Tyler owned a charcoal overcoat. He had worn it the night he gave me the train tickets. The man did not go to the platforms, Samuel continued. He walked to the far end of the station, near the restrooms, and stood in the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Samuel leaned forward slightly. I was sitting close enough to hear him. The station was quiet. Sound carries in a building like this, with the high ceilings and the tile floors. He was trying to keep his voice low, but he was not quiet enough. What did he say? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Thin. Hollow. Samuel's expression grew darker. He said, He's at the platform. Track 7. He's about to board. Samuel recited the words slowly and clearly, as though he had memorized them. Then, there was a pause. Someone on the other end was speaking. After a moment, the man said, I know it's set. Night 3. French Quarter. Make it look like a mugging. The station seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table. Then another pause. Samuel continued. And he said, the insurance will cover everything. 500,000. Once it's confirmed, we're clear. I couldn't breathe. My lungs refused to draw in air. The sounds of the station, the clicking departure board, the distant echo of footsteps, the hiss of steam from the platform, all of it faded into a dull roar. Are you sure? I whispered. Are you absolutely certain? That is what he said? I am certain, Samuel said firmly. I heard every word. What happened then? I managed. He ended the call, Samuel said. He stood there for a moment, looking at his phone. Then he put it in his pocket, turned, and walked toward the parking lot exit. He did not go to the platforms. He did not board any train. He simply left. My mind raced. Tyler had told Megan he couldn't come to the station because of a work emergency. But he had been here. He had been at Union Station the entire time, hiding in the corner, making a phone call that described the exact details of my trip. Track 7. Night 3. French Quarter. Make it look like a mugging. There's one more thing. Samuel said quietly. I looked up at him. Before the man arrived, a woman drove up to the station and dropped off an older gentleman. I saw them through the window. He pointed toward the front entrance. The woman was crying. She hugged the man on the platform for a long time. Then she ran back to her car. He looked at me steadily. That older gentleman was you, wasn't it? I nodded slowly. My throat had closed so tightly I could barely swallow. And the man who made the phone call arrived in a separate car, Samuel continued. About 15 minutes after the woman left, he parked on the opposite side of the lot. I watched him walk in, make the call, and walk out. He drove away in the opposite direction. Tyler had been at the station. He had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, making sure I got on that train. And Megan, my daughter, had known. She had stood on that platform shaking with fear, begging me to be safe, because she knew what was waiting for me at the other end. The question that burned through my chest like a hot wire was simple and devastating. How much did she know? Samuel stood up slowly from the table. I will give you some privacy, he said. But please, do not get on that train. Not until you know the truth. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the table in front of me. Samuel Okonkwo, software engineer. Below the name was a phone number. Call me if you need me, he said. I will be in the station for another hour. He turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the main hall. I was alone. The espresso counter hummed quietly behind me. A barista called out a name. Somewhere across the station, a child laughed. The sounds of ordinary life continued as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped it twice. I stared at the screen, trying to think clearly, trying to decide what to do. My mind felt like it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I was desperately trying to fit them back together. I needed to call someone. Someone I trusted completely. Someone who could help me determine whether this nightmare had any truth behind it. Arthur. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed his name. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. 4. Bobby? Arthur's voice was thick with sleep. It's 7:30 in the morning. On a Saturday. Arthur, I said. My voice was trembling so badly that I barely recognized it. I need you to do something for me right now. Please. Right now. There was a rustling sound. Bedsheets. A mattress creaking. Arthur was sitting up. What's wrong? He asked, suddenly sharp. Where are you? I'm at Union Station. I was supposed to board the train to New Orleans, but something happened. Someone told me something. I swallowed hard. Arthur, I need you to go to my house. Use the spare key under the flower pot on the back porch. Bobby, slow down. What are you talking about? Please just listen. My voice cracked. Go to my house. Check my desk, the filing cabinet in the study, everything. I need you to find out if there is a life insurance policy in my name that I don't know about. Find out if Tyler is listed as the beneficiary. Silence. Bobby, Arthur said carefully. What exactly are you telling me? I'm telling you that someone just informed me my son-in-law made a phone call this morning arranging to have me killed in New Orleans. On the 3rd night of my trip, in the French Quarter, made to look like a mugging, and they mentioned insurance money, $500,000. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. I'm getting dressed, Arthur said. I'll be at your house in 20 minutes. He hung up. I sat there alone at the small table beneath the staircase, my phone resting face down on the table in front of me. The station was slowly filling with morning travelers. Families with children, business people in suits, a young couple holding hands near the departure board. None of them knew. None of them had any idea that a man was sitting 15 feet away from them with his entire world crumbling to dust. Time crawled. 7:45. 8 o'clock. 8:15. Across the station, the departure board clicked and updated. Train number 11, Coast Starlight, track 7. Status. Departed. My train was gone. I had missed it. The trip Helen had dreamed about for 40 years. The trip I had spent the last week imagining. Gone. I felt nothing. My capacity for feeling anything had been used up. At 8:32 my phone rang. Arthur. Bobby. The moment I heard his voice, I knew. In 40 years of friendship, I had never heard Arthur Yee sound like that. His voice was tight, controlled. And beneath the control, there was something that sounded like rage. What did you find? I asked. Arthur exhaled slowly. I'm in your study. I went through the filing cabinet like you asked. Second drawer from the bottom. He paused. I found a life insurance policy, Bobby. A new one. My stomach dropped. It's dated 4 months ago. November of last year. Your name is on it. The beneficiary is Tyler Marcus Shaw. I closed my eyes. The payout amount, Arthur continued, his voice barely above a whisper, is $500,000. The number hung in the air between us like something poisonous. I've seen your signature 1,000 times, Bobby. I helped you fill out paperwork after Helen passed. I know what your handwriting looks like. He paused. The signature on this policy looks like yours, but it's not yours. The strokes are too even. The pressure is too consistent. Someone traced it. It's forged, I said. Yes, Arthur replied. It's forged, he continued without waiting for me to respond. I also checked your financial accounts. You left your banking folder in the desk drawer. There was a withdrawal from your retirement fund 2 weeks ago, $20,000. March 1st. I didn't authorize that, I said immediately. The transaction was conducted online. Arthur said. I can't trace the exact location from here, but the confirmation email was forwarded to an address I don't recognize. My hands were ice cold. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Bobby, there's something else, Arthur said. Tyler's laptop is here, sitting on your coffee table. What? He must have left it during one of his visits last week. I opened it. The browser history is still there. I waited. There are search terms from about 3 weeks ago, Arthur said. He read them slowly, one by one. Accidental tourist death in New Orleans. A pause. French Quarter crime statistics at night. Another pause. Life insurance claim processing time for overseas incidents. Another pause. How long to settle wrongful death claims? Each phrase felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. I also found an email account, Arthur continued. A separate one. Not his regular email. The inbox has a conversation thread with someone using an anonymous address. The subject line reads, Arrangement confirmed. Read it, I said. Arthur's voice was shaking now. Arrangement confirmed. French Quarter, New Orleans. Night 3. Target. Elderly male. Solo traveler. American. Payment. $20,000. Half deposited upon confirmation of travel. Half upon completion. Must appear as random street crime. No witnesses. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles cracked. Bobby, Arthur said. His voice had changed again. It was quieter now, almost gentle. But there was something underneath it that frightened me more than anything else I had heard that morning. What? I whispered. I found something else on the laptop. Prescription records. Tyler has been ordering refills of Helen's medication through an online pharmacy for the last 2 years of her life. The world stopped. Arthur, I said. The dosages, Bobby. Arthur's voice cracked. He was a pharmacist. He had spent 40 years reading prescriptions. He knew dosages the way a musician knows notes. The dosages on these orders are nearly double what Dr. Santos prescribed. I checked them against the prescription records you kept in the filing cabinet. Helen's prescribed dose of Donepezil was 10 milligrams daily. Tyler was ordering 20. Her memantine was supposed to be 14 milligrams. He was ordering 28. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Bobby," Arthur said. And for the first time in 40 years, I heard his voice break completely. Those dosages wouldn't have killed her outright, but sustained over months, over years, they would have accelerated the cognitive decline dramatically. The confusion, the memory loss, the rapid deterioration that Dr. Santos called unusually aggressive. He stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "It wasn't the disease, Bobby. Not all of it. Someone was helping it along." The phone was still pressed against my ear, but I could no longer hear Arthur's voice. A roaring sound filled my head, like standing too close to a waterfall, like being pulled underwater by a current too strong to fight. My vision blurred. The walls of the station tilted sideways. I grabbed the edge of the table with my free hand and held on as though the floor might give way beneath me. "Bobby?" Arthur's voice cut through the noise, distant and thin. "Bobby, are you still there?" "He killed her," I said. The words came out of me before I could stop them. They came out flat and hollow, like stones dropping into deep water. "He killed Helen." Arthur didn't correct me. He didn't say it was more complicated than that. He didn't offer qualifications or medical caveats. He was a pharmacist. He understood exactly what those double dosages meant, sustained over 2 years, administered to a woman whose brain was already under siege. "Yes," Arthur said quietly. "I believe he did." And then the memories came. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once, like a dam breaking. Tyler sitting on the couch beside Helen, carefully counting out her pills. 1, 2, 3, 4. Placing them in her open palm with a soft smile. "Here you go, Mom." Helen looking up at him with those confused, trusting eyes and whispering, "Thank you, Tyler. You're such a good boy." Every Sunday evening for nearly 2 years. The same routine, the same gentle voice, the same small white pills in his steady hands. I remembered the night Helen forgot my name for the first time. She had looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Excuse me, sir. Do you know where my husband is?" I had blamed the disease. Dr. Santos had blamed the disease. Everyone had blamed the disease. But Tyler had been in our house the evening before, sitting beside Helen, handing her the pills, smiling that careful, practiced smile. I remembered the afternoon when Helen could no longer operate her turntable. She had stood in front of the shelf, running her fingers along the record sleeves, her face blank and frightened. "Bobby, which one is the one I love?" Tyler had visited 2 days earlier. I remembered the months when Helen's decline had suddenly accelerated, when Dr. Santos had used the phrase unusually aggressive progression and adjusted her treatment plan again and again. Every adjustment, every new medication, every desperate attempt to slow the disease. None of it had worked, because someone had been sabotaging it from the inside. Every memory that had once been painful was now something far worse. Every moment I had spent watching Helen disappear. Every night I had held her hand while she stared at me with empty eyes. Every morning I had whispered her name, hoping she would recognize me. All of it had been poisoned, corrupted, stolen. Tyler had not just planned to take my life. He had already taken Helen's. "Bobby," Arthur said. His voice pulled me back. "I need you to listen to me." "Are you listening?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'm calling the police right now. I'm going to tell them everything I found. The insurance policy, the bank records, the laptop, the prescription records. All of it. They need to see this immediately." "Yes," I said again. The word felt like the only one I had left. "Stay where you are," Arthur said firmly. "Do not leave the station. Do not call Tyler. Do not call Megan. Do not do anything until the police arrive. Do you understand me? I understand, Bobby. Arthur's voice softened. For a moment, he sounded like the man I had known for 40 years, the man who had helped me through Helen's funeral, who had sat with me in silence when words weren't enough. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, my friend. I couldn't respond. My throat had closed completely. I ended the call and set the phone down on the table. My hands were trembling. My whole body was trembling. The coffee I had never ordered sat nowhere in front of me, because I had never even thought to order it. I just sat there. A 65-year-old man in a train station, surrounded by strangers living their ordinary lives, while mine collapsed silently around me. My son-in-law had murdered my wife. Not with a weapon. Not with violence. With patience. With pills. With a smile. And a glass of water. And the words, "Here you go, Mom." He had sat beside her week after week, month after month, slowly destroying her mind while the rest of us watched and wept and blamed the disease. He had held her hand at the hospital. He had brought flowers to the house. He had stood at her funeral and cried real tears. Or what looked like real tears. While the woman he had been quietly killing for 2 years was lowered into the ground. And now, he was trying to do the same to me. Differently. Faster. But with the same cold, methodical calculation. I thought about Helen's last lucid moment. That cold Wednesday afternoon in March, when she had gripped my hand with sudden clarity and looked at me with eyes that were, for one final time, fully hers. Take care of our girl, Bobby. Promise me. I had always believed she was talking about Megan. That she wanted me to watch over our daughter after she was gone. But sitting in that station, with the full weight of what Tyler had done pressing down on me, I wondered if Helen had sensed something, even through the fog of her disease, even through the confusion and the lost memories and the crumbling walls of her mind. Had some part of her known? Had she felt the wrongness of what was happening to her, the unnaturalness of how fast she was fading? Even if she could no longer name it? Take care of our girl. Maybe it wasn't just a request. Maybe it was a warning. I sat there for what felt like hours. The station moved around me. Trains arrived and departed. Announcements echoed through the high-ceilinged hall. People bought coffee and checked their phones and dragged their suitcases across the polished floor. The world kept turning. But I had stopped. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. Police contacted. They are sending detectives to the station now. Stay where you are. I am coming too. I read the message twice. Then I set the phone down and pressed both palms flat against the table, trying to stop the shaking. It didn't work. I closed my eyes and saw Helen's face. Not the Helen of the final years, confused and frightened and fading. The Helen I had married. The Helen who had stood in Waterfront Park on a spring afternoon in 1982 and said, "You look like someone who actually listens to the music." The Helen who had cried on Royal Street because a stranger's trumpet was too beautiful to bear. The Helen who had pressed each tulip bulb into the earth of our garden as though she were planting a promise. I had spent 5 years watching that woman disappear piece by piece, believing it was the disease taking her away from me. Believing that nature was cruel, but that we had fought as hard as we could. Believing that her death, while devastating, had been natural. Now I knew the truth. The disease had not taken Helen alone. Someone had helped it, and that someone had stood at her graveside, wiped his eyes, and then come home and started planning how to collect money from my death. I opened my eyes. The station was bright and busy. Rain still tapped against the tall, arched windows. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded. I was still alive. Helen was not. But I was still here. And I was going to make sure that the man who had taken her from me, the man who had tried to take me too, would answer for every single pill he had placed in her trusting hand. The detective arrived at 9:47 that morning. I was still sitting on the wooden bench inside Union Station, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Arthur sat beside me, his arm resting across the back of the bench, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence without him saying a word. He had driven from southeast Portland in under 20 minutes. When he walked through those station doors, he did not ask questions. He just sat down, placed one hand on my knee, and said, "I am here." Two figures approached from the main entrance. The first was a woman, mid-40s, dark hair pulled into a low bun, wearing a navy blazer over a white blouse. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Her name was Detective Rosa Delgado, Portland Police Bureau, Major Crimes Division. Behind her was a younger man, early 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, in a pressed uniform, Officer Kevin Briggs. He carried a black folder under his left arm. Detective Delgado stopped in front of me and extended her hand. Her grip was firm but not aggressive. Her eyes moved across my face, the way someone reads a document, line by line, absorbing every detail. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "I understand you have had a difficult morning. We are going to need your full cooperation. And in return, I promise you, we will handle this with everything we have." I nodded. I did not trust my voice yet. She asked if I would be willing to come to the precinct. I said yes. Arthur drove me. Officer Briggs rode ahead in the squad car. Detective Delgado followed in her unmarked sedan. The rain had stopped by then, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the gray sky like polished stone. The precinct was a rectangular building on Southwest 2nd Avenue. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. The hallway smelled of burnt coffee and old carpet. They led me to an interview room on the second floor. A metal table, 4 chairs, a single window with blinds half drawn. Detective Delgado sat across from me. Officer Briggs stood near the door, his folder now open on the table. She began with my name, my age, my address. Then she asked me to tell the story from the beginning. I told her everything. The train tickets, Megan crying at the station, Sam Okonkwo and what he overheard, the phone call to Arthur, the insurance policy, the laptop, the emails, the prescriptions. I spoke for nearly 40 minutes without stopping, and she did not interrupt me once. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands on the table. "Mr. Callahan, your friend Arthur forwarded us photographs of everything he found at your home. We have been cross-referencing that material since he contacted us at 8:15 this morning. I want to walk you through what we have confirmed so far." She nodded to Officer Briggs. He opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. "This is the life insurance policy," Detective Delgado said. $500,000. Issued November 14th, 2023. The beneficiary is Tyler Marcus Shaw. Your signature appears on the policyholder line. However, our forensic document analyst reviewed the scan your friend sent. The pen pressure is perfectly uniform across every letter. No variation, no hesitation marks, no natural tremor. For a 65-year-old man, that is not consistent with authentic handwriting. We believe this signature was traced or digitally reproduced. She paused and let that settle before continuing. Second, the $20,000 withdrawal from your retirement account on March 1st of this year. The transaction was initiated online. The IP address was routed through a virtual private network, but our cyber unit traced the VPN exit node back to a residential internet connection registered to Tyler Shaw at 4217 Millbridge Lane, Charlotte, North Carolina. Officer Briggs placed the next document on the table. A printed screenshot of browser history. Third, Tyler Shaw's laptop. Your friend photographed the browser history before anything could be erased. The searches include accidental tourist death New Orleans, French Quarter crime statistics at night, life insurance claim processing time for overseas incidents, and how long to settle wrongful death claims. All searches were conducted between February 20th and March 10th of this year. My stomach turned. I pressed my palms flat on the table to keep them from shaking. Fourth, she continued, An email thread recovered from that same laptop. The subject line reads, "Arrangement confirmed. The messages detail a plan. A. The 4. A. The 4. N. 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 A lie. A target described as an elderly male, solo traveler. American. Location, the French Quarter, New Orleans. Timing, night 3 of the trip. Method, staged as a random street crime. Payment, $20,000. Half on travel confirmation, half on completion. I closed my eyes. The fluorescent light buzzed above me like a trapped insect. 5th, we ran a background financial check on Tyler Shaw. He carries approximately $700,000 in debt, primarily from online gambling platforms and private lending networks. At least 2 of those lenders have histories of using threats and physical intimidation to collect. Tyler Shaw was not planning a vacation for you, Mr. Callahan. He was solving a financial problem. Officer Briggs placed one final sheet on the table. Medical records. 6th, your friend Arthur, a licensed pharmacist, flagged prescription records, showing that Tyler Shaw ordered and picked up medications for your late wife Helen over a 2-year period. The dosages he collected were consistently double what her physician prescribed. Donepezil, 10 milligrams prescribed, 20 milligrams dispensed. Memantine, 14 milligrams prescribed, 28 milligrams dispensed. We have forwarded these records to the Multnomah County Medical Examiner for review. Detective Delgado let the silence hang in the room. Then she straightened in her chair. Mr. Callahan, based on everything we have gathered, we are preparing arrest warrants for Tyler Marcus Shaw. We have coordinated with Interpol and New Orleans Police Department regarding the individual hired for the French Quarter incident. Tyler Shaw will be taken into custody within the next 12 hours. I exhaled slowly. My chest felt hollow, as if the air had been pulled out from inside my ribs. There is one more thing, Detective Delgado said. Her voice dropped slightly. Something we found that I need to discuss with you carefully. She looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. It was not the controlled professionalism she had shown for the past hour. It was something closer to sympathy. It involves your daughter. The room went silent. Even the fluorescent light above seemed to stop buzzing. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Detective Delgado reached into a cardboard box beneath the table and placed a sealed plastic bag in front of me. Inside was a small notebook, the kind you might find in any drugstore. It had a dark green cover, worn at the corners, with a thin elastic strap holding it shut. The pages were wrinkled, as if they had been wet at some point and dried again. This was found inside your daughter's vehicle, she said. Megan's car was parked 3 blocks from Union Station this morning. She did not drive home after dropping you off. She parked on Northwest Glizon Street, turned off the engine, and remained in the vehicle. A patrol officer noticed the car at approximately 7:15 because the hazard lights were flashing. When they approached, Megan was sitting in the driver's seat, unresponsive, not unconscious, just still. She was holding this notebook against her chest. I stared at the plastic bag. The notebook was no larger than my hand. She gave it to the officer voluntarily. Detective Delgado continued. She said, and I am quoting, "Tell my father I kept records. He deserves to know." Officer Briggs opened a second folder and placed a series of photocopied pages on the table. They were scans of the notebook's contents. The handwriting was Megan's. I would have recognized it anywhere. When she was a little girl, she used to leave notes on the kitchen counter before school. "Have a good day, Daddy." Her letters were always round, slightly tilted to the right, with small circles instead of dots above the letter I. The handwriting on these pages was the same, but different. The letters were smaller, tighter, pressed harder into the paper, as if each word had been written under tremendous pressure. Detective Delgado pointed to the first page. The earliest entry is dated June 22nd, 2021. Over 2 years before the train tickets. I will read selected passages with your permission. I nodded. I could not bring myself to read them on my own. She adjusted her glasses and began. June 22nd, 2021. Tyler hit me for the first time tonight. We were arguing about money. I told him he needed to stop gambling. He grabbed my wrist and twisted it behind my back. Then he slapped me across the face. He apologized immediately. He cried. He said it would never happen again. I believed him. She turned the page. October 9th, 2021. It happened again. This time he pushed me into the bathroom door. The handle caught my lower back and left a bruise the size of a fist. I wore a long sweater when we visited Dad the following weekend. He did not notice. I made sure he would not notice. My jaw tightened. I thought about that weekend. I remembered Megan wearing an oversized cardigan, even though the house was warm. I had asked her if she was feeling cold. She laughed and said she was just comfortable. I believed her. I did not push further. Detective Delgado continued turning pages, reading entries that spanned 2 years. The violence escalated gradually. In March of 2022, Tyler broke a dinner plate against the kitchen wall, and a piece of ceramic cut Megan's forearm. She told the emergency room nurse she had slipped while washing dishes. In August, he locked her in the bedroom closet for 3 hours because she questioned a $5,000 credit card charge. In November, he threw her phone into the toilet after she tried to call her father on Thanksgiving night. Each entry ended the same way. He apologized. He said it was the stress. He said the gambling debts were crushing him. He said things would be different. They never were. Then the notebook shifted. The entries from late 2023 took on a different tone. Less fear. More calculation. November 3rd, 2023. Detective Delgado read. Tyler told me the plan tonight. He wants to take out an insurance policy on Dad. $500,000. He says if something happens to Dad while he is traveling, the policy pays out within 90 days. He says he knows people who can make it look like an accident. I told him he was insane. He grabbed Lily's bedroom door handle and said if I told anyone, I would lose her. Not through the courts. He said I would lose her permanently. The detective paused and looked at me. Your daughter did not cooperate willingly, Mr. Callahan. Every entry after that date shows a woman documenting evidence against her own husband while living under direct threat to her child. She turned to the final pages. February 28th, 2024. Tyler finalized everything today. The tickets are bought. The email is sent. The man in New Orleans has been paid half. I have copied every document I could find. The insurance policy, the bank statements, the email confirmations. I hid copies inside the lining of my winter coat in the hall closet. I also mailed a sealed envelope to Arthur Yee's home address with instructions to open it only if something happens to Dad or to me. My hands were trembling. Arthur, sitting beside me in the hallway outside the interview room, had not mentioned receiving any envelope. I would later learn that it had arrived at his house the morning of March 14th, the same day I was supposed to board that train. He had not yet opened his mail when I called him from the station. Detective Delgado placed one last photocopy on the table. It was not from the notebook. It was a single sheet of paper, folded twice, found tucked inside the notebook's back cover. It was a letter addressed to me. Dear Dad, it began. If you are reading this, then something has gone wrong, and I could not stop it in time. I want you to know that I tried. I tried every day for 2 years to find a way out. I kept records because I knew that one day someone would need proof. I could not go to the police because Tyler monitors my phone, my car, and my every movement. He threatened Lily. Not with custody, with harm. I could not risk it. Please do not hate me. I did everything I could to keep you and Lily safe. I am sorry I was not strong enough to do more. I love you. Megan. I put my head in my hands and wept. Detective Delgado waited. She did not rush me. She did not offer empty comfort. She simply waited, her hands folded on the table, until I raised my head again. "Mr. Callahan," she said quietly, "your daughter is currently in protective custody at a women's shelter on the east side of Portland. She is safe. Lily is with her. We placed them there at 7:45 this morning." I exhaled a breath I did not know I had been holding. "What happens to her now?" I asked. The detective leaned forward. "That depends on many things. But I can tell you this. The evidence she gathered, this notebook, the hidden documents, the letter to Arthur, all of it is being used to build the case against Tyler Shaw. Your daughter was not his partner. She was his prisoner." Detective Delgado stood and buttoned her blazer. She looked at Officer Briggs, who closed the folder and gave a single nod. Something had shifted in the room. The careful, methodical pace of the interview was gone. Now there was urgency. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "we are moving forward with the arrest of Tyler Shaw. I need you to remain here at the precinct. Arthur can stay with you. There is a waiting area at the end of the hallway with coffee and a television. I will update you as soon as we have him in custody." I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to know how they would find him, where he was, whether he would resist. But she was already walking toward the door, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in short, clipped sentences that I could only half hear. Officer Briggs followed, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his vest. Arthur came into the interview room after they left. He sat in the chair Detective Delgado had occupied and placed a paper cup of water in front of me. I had not asked for it, but he knew. "You heard?" I said. "Most of it," he replied. "These walls are not thick." We sat in silence. The clock on the wall read 10:22. The second hand moved in tiny jerks, each tick louder than it should have been. I thought about Megan. I thought about her sitting in that car on Northwest Gleason Street. Engine off. Hazard lights blinking. Clutching a green notebook against her chest. Like a shield. I thought about every time she had visited me over the past 2 years. Every forced smile. Every excuse for a bruise I never saw, because she made certain I would not see it. I thought about Lily. 5 years old. Growing up in a house where her father's footsteps meant silence, and her mother's eyes meant fear. Arthur did not speak. He just sat there, turning his wedding ring around his finger, the way he always did when he was thinking. At 11:15, Detective Delgado called the precinct, and Officer Briggs relayed the update through the interview room phone on speaker. Tyler Shaw had not gone home after leaving Union Station that morning. Cell phone tower records showed his device pinging near the Portland International Airport at 6:58, then moving south along Interstate 5. By 8:30, the signal stabilized at a location in Salem, Oregon, a Holiday Inn Express on Commercial Street Southeast. He had checked in under a false name, David Mercer. He paid with a prepaid Visa card. The Salem Police Department was notified at 10:45. 2 patrol units and a plainclothes detective from Marion County arrived at the hotel at 11:02. They confirmed with the front desk clerk that a man matching Tyler's description, tall, mid-30s, dark hair, charcoal overcoat, had checked into room 214 on the second floor. He had requested a late checkout and asked not to be disturbed. At 11:09, officers positioned themselves at both ends of the second-floor hallway. The plainclothes detective knocked on the door of room 214 and identified himself as hotel maintenance responding to a water leak report. There was no answer for 12 seconds. Then the door opened. Tyler Shaw stood in the doorway wearing a white undershirt and gray sweatpants. His charcoal overcoat was draped over the desk chair behind him. His phone was on the nightstand, screen facing down. A half-eaten sandwich from a gas station sat on the bedspread next to an open laptop. According to the arrest report I would later read, Tyler did not run. He did not shout. He looked at the detective, then at the 2 uniformed officers who appeared from either side of the hallway, and his face went completely blank. Not surprised. Not angry. Not afraid. Blank. As if he had been waiting for this moment and had already rehearsed his response, which was no response at all. He was handcuffed at 11:11 in the morning. He was read his Miranda rights in the hallway of the Holiday Inn Express, while a housekeeper pushed a linen cart past him without making eye contact. He said nothing, not a single word. He was placed in the back of a Marion County patrol car and transported to the Portland Police Bureau's Central Precinct, arriving at 12:47 that afternoon. Officer Briggs told us all of this in the interview room, while Arthur and I sat across from him. When he finished, he placed his hands flat on the table and said, "He is in the building, 2 floors below us. He has requested an attorney." I felt something I did not expect. I thought I would feel relief. I thought the knot in my chest would loosen when I heard that Tyler was in handcuffs. But it did not loosen. It tightened, because now it was real. Every suspicion, every piece of evidence, every word in Megan's notebook had just become a man sitting in a concrete room beneath my feet, waiting for a lawyer. "What about Megan?" I asked. Officer Briggs glanced at his notes. "Your daughter was formally interviewed at the women's shelter at 10:30 this morning by a female detective from our domestic violence unit. She cooperated fully. She provided verbal testimony consistent with every entry in her notebook. She also surrendered additional evidence, including photographs of bruises taken on her phone over the past 18 months, screenshots of threatening text messages from Tyler, and a voice recording from January of this year, in which Tyler describes the insurance plan and the contact in New Orleans." He paused. "She has been placed under protective custody, not arrest. The district attorney's office reviewed her case and determined that she acted under duress and coercion. She is not being charged as a co-conspirator at this time. However, she will be required to testify at trial." I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above me flickered once, then held steady. "Can I see her?" I asked. "Not yet," Officer Briggs said. "For her safety and for the integrity of the investigation. Contact is restricted until Tyler Shaw has been formally arraigned. That will happen within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. My daughter was 3 miles away, and I could not hold her. My granddaughter was drawing pictures on the floor of a shelter, and I could not tell her that everything would be all right." Arthur reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. "She is safe, Bobby," he said. "Lily is safe. That is what matters right now." I nodded. He was right. But knowing someone is safe and feeling that they are safe are 2 different things entirely. Outside the precinct window, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds for the first time that day. It hit the wet pavement on Southwest 2nd Avenue and scattered into 1,000 tiny points of light. I watched them shimmer and thought of Helen. I thought of what she would say if she were sitting beside me. I thought of her voice, the way it sounded on summer mornings when she would lean against the kitchen doorframe and say, "Bobby, the world is still turning. Let us turn with it." The world was still turning, but it felt like it had tilted, and I was holding on to the edge with both hands. 2 days passed before I saw his face again. Detective Delgado called the precinct waiting area at 4:17 on the afternoon of March 16th. Arthur answered the phone because my hands had not stopped trembling since the morning of the arrest. He listened, nodded twice, then held the receiver toward me. "They want to know if you are willing to observe the interrogation," he said. "You would be behind one-way glass. He would not see you. You do not have to do this." I took the phone. "I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. Arthur drove. Neither of us spoke during the ride. The streets of downtown Portland were quiet in that strange way. Cities become quiet in the late afternoon, when the workday has ended but the evening has not yet begun. The sky was the color of wet concrete. I watched the windshield wipers move back and forth, and tried to prepare myself for what I was about to see. But there is no way to prepare yourself for sitting behind a sheet of glass and watching the man who married your daughter, the man who held your granddaughter at her christening, the man who handed your dying wife her medication every evening for 2 years, explain why he tried to have you killed. The observation room was small, 4 feet by 8 feet. 1 chair. 1 window made of glass that looked like a mirror from the other side. a single speaker mounted in the upper corner, so I could hear everything. Officer Briggs stood beside me. He did not sit. He kept his arms crossed and his eyes on the glass. Tyler was already seated in the interrogation room when I entered the observation area. He wore an orange jumpsuit. His wrists were cuffed to a metal ring, bolted to the center of the table. His hair, usually combed back with precision, was loose and falling across his forehead. He had not shaved. His eyes were open and still, fixed on a point somewhere on the wall behind Detective Delgado's empty chair. She entered at 4:41. She carried a single manila folder. She sat down across from Tyler, placed the folder on the table, and folded her hands on top of it. She did not speak for 11 seconds. I counted them. She simply looked at him, the way a surgeon looks at an image before making the first cut. "Mr. Shaw," she said, "your attorney has advised you of your rights and has approved this interview under the condition that it be recorded. Do you understand?" "Yes," Tyler said. His voice was flat. No emotion, no inflection, just a sound shaped into a word. "I want to begin with Helen Callahan," Detective Delgado said. "Your mother-in-law. She was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease in January of 2020. She passed away in March of 2023. During the final 2 years of her life, you were responsible for administering her evening medication. Is that correct?" "Yes." The prescribed dosages were Donepezil 10 milligrams and Memantine 14 milligrams. Pharmacy records show that you consistently collected double those amounts. Donepezil 20 milligrams, Memantine 28 milligrams. "Can you explain why?" Tyler tilted his head slightly. The movement was slow, almost mechanical, like a clock hand shifting from 1 minute to the next. "She was already dying," he said. I moved the timeline forward. The room behind the glass went cold. I felt Officer Briggs shift his weight beside me. My own breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest, and refused to move in either direction. Detective Delgado did not react. Her expression did not change. She opened the manila folder and placed a printed page on the table. "This is the email thread recovered from your laptop." Subject line: "Arrangement confirmed." It details a plan to stage a fatal mugging in the French Quarter of New Orleans, targeting your father-in-law, Robert Callahan, on the 3rd night of his trip. Payment of $20,000. "Did you write these emails?" "I coordinated them," Tyler said. "I did not write all of them. The contact in New Orleans handled his end." "Who is this contact?" "I do not know his real name. I found him through a forum. He used the name Crescent. We communicated through encrypted email. I paid the first $10,000 through cryptocurrency on March 2nd. Detective Delgado turned to the next page. "Why Robert Callahan?" Tyler looked up for the first time. His eyes moved to the one-way glass. He could not see me. I knew that. But in that moment, I felt as if he were staring directly through the mirror, through the wall, through every year I had spent trusting him, and into the center of my chest. $500,000, he said. "That is why. I owed $700,000 to people who do not send reminders in the mail. They send other things. I needed a solution. Robert had no will that excluded me. Megan was the sole heir. I was Megan's husband. The math was simple. And Helen?" Detective Delgado asked. "What was the math for Helen?" Tyler paused. For the first time, something moved behind his eyes. Not guilt, not regret. Something closer to irritation, like a man being asked to explain something he considered obvious. "Helen was costing money," he said. "Home care, medications, adjustments to the house. Every month, Robert spent more on her than I could redirect. If she had lived another 3 years in that condition, there would have been nothing left. No savings, no home equity, no insurance value. She was a financial drain on an asset I needed to remain intact." I placed my hand on the glass. "I do not know why. Maybe I thought I could reach through it. Maybe I thought I could feel something on the other side that would make his words less real. But the glass was cold and smooth, and the words were already in the air, and there was no taking them back. Detective Delgado closed the folder. Mr. Shaw, you are being charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and contributing to the wrongful death of Helen Marie Callahan. Additional charges may follow pending the medical examiner's final report. Do you have anything else you wish to say? Tyler leaned back in his chair as far as the handcuffs allowed. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at the glass again. I would have gotten away with it, he said, if it were not for the man at the train station. I still do not know who he was. Detective Delgado stood. His name is Sam Okonkwo, she said. And he was paying attention. She walked out of the interrogation room and closed the door behind her. The lock clicked. The fluorescent lights hummed. Tyler sat alone at the metal table, his hands chained to the ring, staring at the wall. I turned away from the glass. Officer Briggs opened the observation room door and held it for me. I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like floor cleaner and old paper. I leaned against the wall and pressed both palms against the painted cinder block. Arthur was waiting at the end of the corridor. He looked at my face and said nothing. He simply walked over, put one arm around my shoulders, and guided me toward the exit. We did not speak until we reached the car. Then, sitting in the passenger seat with the engine running and the heater blowing warm air against my knees, I said the only thing I could say. He called her a financial drain, Arthur. He called my wife a financial drain. Arthur gripped the steering wheel with both hands and stared straight ahead. I know, Bobby, he said quietly. I know. 3 days after Tyler's interrogation, Detective Delgado arranged for me to speak with Megan. It was not a visit. The district attorney's office would not allow face-to-face contact until after the arraignment, but Delgado made a request on my behalf. And after 2 hours of calls between her office and the shelter's legal coordinator, they agreed to a supervised video call. 15 minutes. A detective would be present on Megan's end. Officer Briggs would sit beside me. Arthur drove me to the precinct on the morning of March 19th. The sky was clear for the first time in nearly a week. Sunlight came through the windshield and hit the dashboard in a long yellow stripe. I remember thinking that the world had no right to look this beautiful on a day like this. The video call was set up in a small conference room on the 3rd floor. A laptop sat in the center of a rectangular table. Officer Briggs tested the microphone, adjusted the camera, and stepped back against the wall. At 9:15, the screen lit up. Megan appeared in a room with pale yellow walls. Her hair was pulled back. She wore a gray sweatshirt too large for her. No makeup. Her eyes were swollen. Behind her left shoulder, a window with white curtains. A female detective sat just outside the frame, visible only as a dark sleeve and the corner of a clipboard. For 7 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then her chin began to tremble. Her lips pressed together, and she broke. "Dad," she said. The word came out cracked and wet. "Dad, I am so sorry." I tried to speak. Nothing came. I tried again. "Megan, tell me everything. From the beginning." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and nodded. Tyler started gambling in 2019. Online. Small amounts at first. By 2020, he was spending thousands a month. I found credit card statements hidden in his office. When I confronted him, he said it was under control. She paused. By 2021, he owed over 100,000. He borrowed from private lenders, people who called the house at midnight and hung up when I answered. The first time he hit me was June of that year. He slapped me because I told him we could not afford Lily's preschool and his gambling at the same time. Her voice steadied slightly, the way a person's hands stop shaking once they begin the work they have been dreading. When Mom got worse, Tyler offered to manage her medications. He said, "You looked exhausted, Dad." I thought he was being kind. I did not know what he was doing with the dosages until after Mom died. I found the pharmacy receipts in his coat pocket, double the prescribed amounts. Every refill. I gripped the edge of the table hard enough to leave marks. I wanted to tell you, she continued. Every visit. But Tyler monitored everything. My phone, my email, my car had a tracking device under the rear bumper since 2022. I found it during an oil change but left it because if I removed it, he would know that I knew. She looked down at her hands. In November of 2023, he told me the plan. The insurance policy. The trip. The man in New Orleans. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. When I told him I would go to the police, he walked into Lily's bedroom, stood over her crib and said, "If you make that call, you will not have a daughter to protect." Her voice broke again. She pressed both hands against her face. When she lowered them, her cheeks were streaked and raw. I started the notebook the next day. I copied every document I could find. I photographed every bruise. I recorded him whenever I could. I hid everything, in places he would never look. The coat lining, a sealed envelope to Arthur, a flash drive taped inside the battery compartment of Lily's toy piano. I would later learn that police recovered that flash drive from the shelter. It contained over 200 files. Photographs, financial records, email screenshots, and 3 audio recordings. The morning I drove you to the station, Megan said. I almost told you in the car. I had the words ready. But when I opened my mouth, all I could think about was Lily. If Tyler found out, what would he do? Every path I imagined ended with Lily in danger. So I held you on that platform, told you I loved you, and I ran. I ran because I could not stand there and watch you walk towards something I could not stop. She was sobbing now. Deep, shaking sobs that moved her entire body. The scarf, she whispered. I left it on purpose. The note inside. I wrote those words because I did not know if I would ever say them to your face. I am sorry, Dad. I am sorry I stayed silent. I am sorry I was not brave enough. I leaned forward until my face was inches from the screen. Megan, I said. You kept a notebook for 2 years. You hid evidence in a toy piano. You mailed a sealed envelope to Arthur. You recorded a man who threatened your child. You drove me to that station knowing what was waiting, and you left a note in your scarf because you were afraid it might be the last thing you ever said to me. I swallowed hard. Do not tell me you were not brave enough. You were the bravest person in that house. She covered her mouth with both hands and closed her eyes. Her shoulders shook. Officer Briggs touched my shoulder. 2 minutes remaining. Mr. Callahan, where is Lily? I asked. Megan wiped her face and almost smiled. She is in the next room. She drew a picture this morning. A house with a big tree and a man on the porch. She said it was Grandpa Bobby's house. She wants to visit when the rain stops. I nodded. The words had finally run out. The screen went dark at 9:30. I sat in that conference room for a long time. Officer Briggs offered coffee. I shook my head. Arthur came in, sat beside me, and said nothing. The sunlight moved across the table in a slow arc. The same way it used to move across the kitchen floor on Alberta Street, the same way it moved across Helen's face on those last quiet mornings, when she would sit by the window and hum a melody she could no longer name. The trial began on June 3, 2024, at the Multnomah County Courthouse on Southwest 4th Avenue in Portland. I had never been inside a courtroom before. I had seen them on television, in movies, in photographs, but none of that prepared me for the weight of the real thing. The ceiling was high. The wood paneling along the walls was dark and polished. The American flag stood to the right of the judge's bench, its folds perfectly still. The room smelled of old paper and floor wax and something else I could not name. Something heavy, something that had been in the air of that room for decades, absorbed into the wood, pressed into the carpet. The weight of every verdict that had ever been spoken between those walls. Arthur sat beside me in the second row behind the prosecution. He wore a dark suit I had never seen before. He had gotten a haircut. When I looked at him, he gave me a single nod, the same nod he had given me every difficult morning for the past 40 years. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Catherine Wells, a woman in her early 50s with short silver hair and a voice that carried across the room without ever rising above a conversational tone. She spoke the way a surgeon cuts. Precise. Deliberate. No wasted motion. Tyler was brought in through a side door at 9:12. He wore a dark blue suit, provided by his defense attorney. His hair was combed. His face was clean-shaven. He looked, for all appearances, like the man who had once sat at my Thanksgiving table and carved the turkey while Helen laughed at something Lily had said. But his eyes were different. They were flat and dry and focused on a point somewhere above the judge's head, as if the proceedings were happening to someone else entirely. Megan was not in the courtroom that first day. She would testify later, on June 7th, via closed-circuit video from a secure location, per the district attorney's arrangement, to protect her from direct contact with Tyler. The trial lasted 9 days. I will not recount every hour. Some moments blurred together. Some I remember with a clarity that feels almost violent, as if they were carved into my memory with a blade. I remember Catherine Wells standing before the jury and laying out the case in her opening statement. She began with Helen. She showed the jury a photograph of Helen and me on our wedding day in 1983. Then she showed the pharmacy records, the dosages, the refill dates, the gap between what was prescribed and what was administered. She explained in plain language what double doses of Dunpezil and Memantine do to a brain already under siege from Alzheimer's disease. She said the word accelerated 4 times. She never said the word murder. She did not need to. I remember the forensic document analyst who testified that the signature on the $500,000 life insurance policy was not mine. She projected the document on a screen and pointed, letter by letter, to the uniform pen pressure, the absence of micro-tremors, the mechanical consistency that no human hand produces naturally. She said, "This signature was either traced or digitally fabricated." Tyler's defense attorney objected. The objection was overruled. I remember the cybercrime specialist from the Portland Police Bureau who traced the $20,000 transfer from my retirement account through a virtual private network to Tyler's home IP address in Charlotte. He explained the technical process in terms the jury could follow. He showed the email thread. Subject line: arrangement confirmed. He read the contents aloud. When he reached the phrase, "make it look like a mugging," a woman in the jury box closed her eyes. I remember Sam Okonkwo taking the stand on June 5th. He wore a pressed white shirt and spoke with a calm, measured voice. He described what he saw and heard at Union Station on the morning of March 14th. The man in the charcoal overcoat. The phone call. The words, "Track 7, Night 3, French Quarter. Make it look like a mugging. The insurance will cover everything." When the defense attorney asked Sam why he had chosen to intervene rather than simply call the police, Sam paused for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Because my wife died alone in a hospital in Lagos while I was on a business trip in San Francisco. I was not there when it mattered. I swore I would never let that happen again if I could help it." The courtroom was silent for a long time after that. I remember Megan's testimony on June 7th. She appeared on a screen mounted to the wall beside the jury box. She wore a white blouse. Her hair was down. She spoke for over 2 hours. She described the gambling, the debts, the violence, the threats against Lily. She described finding the pharmacy receipts. She described the night Tyler told her the plan, standing over Lily's crib. She described the notebook, the flash drive, the sealed envelope to Arthur. When Catherine Wells asked why she had not gone to the police, Megan said, "Because he told me that if I did, my daughter would disappear." And I believed him. Tyler's defense attorney attempted to paint Megan as a co-conspirator who had participated willingly and was now shifting blame to save herself. Megan did not waver. She answered every question directly. When he asked if she had ever benefited financially from Tyler's schemes, she said, "The only thing I ever received from Tyler was fear." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On June 12th, At 3:17 in the afternoon, the foreman stood and read the verdicts. Tyler Marcus Shaw, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. Insurance fraud. Identity theft. Elder financial abuse. Contributing to the wrongful death of Helen Marie Callahan. The sentencing hearing was held on June 26th. Judge Patricia Yamamoto addressed Tyler directly. She spoke for 11 minutes. She referenced Helen's medical records, the forged insurance policy, the email to the hired contact in New Orleans, and Sam Okonkwo's testimony. She said, "Mr. Shaw, you treated human lives as line items on a balance sheet. You accelerated the death of a woman who trusted you and conspired to end the life of a man who welcomed you into his family." Tyler was sentenced to 25 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for 18 years. Megan's case was handled separately. Based on the evidence of sustained domestic abuse, coercion, and her substantial cooperation with the investigation, the district attorney recommended a reduced charge. She pleaded guilty to failure to report a felony conspiracy. She was sentenced to 2 years at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon, with eligibility for early release after 14 months. When the judge read Megan's sentence, I looked at my daughter on the closed-circuit screen. She nodded once. She did not cry. She mouthed 2 words toward the camera. "Thank you." I do not know if she was speaking to me, to the judge, or to someone else entirely. But I held those 2 words, the way you hold a candle in a dark room, carefully, with both hands, afraid that even breathing too hard might put it out. Arthur drove me home that evening. We took the long route, through the West Hills, past the reservoir, down Burnside. The sun was setting behind the Coast Range, and the sky was the color of ripe peaches. Neither of us spoke for most of the drive. Then, as we turned onto Alberta Street, Arthur said, "Helen would be proud of you, Bobby." I looked out the window at the house where I had lived for 37 years. "She would be proud of Megan," I said. I sold the house on Alberta Street in August of 2024. I had lived there for 37 years. Helen and I had moved in 3 weeks after our wedding, carrying boxes up the front steps in the July heat, while the neighbor's sprinkler threw arcs of water across the lawn. We had painted every room together. We had replaced the kitchen floor twice. We had watched the oak tree in the backyard grow from a sapling no taller than my waist into a canopy that shaded the entire porch by afternoon. Every wall in that house held a memory, and every memory held Helen's voice. But a house is not a home when the person who made it one is gone. Arthur helped me pack. We spent 3 weekends sorting through decades of accumulated life. Clothes, books, kitchen tools, photo albums, Helen's jazz record collection, which filled 4 large boxes and weighed more than anything else we carried. I kept all of them. I gave away the furniture, the gardening tools, and most of the kitchen appliances. I donated Helen's clothes to the women's shelter on the east side, the same shelter where Megan and Lily had stayed. The staff remembered them. A woman at the front desk said Lily had drawn pictures for every resident on her floor before she left. The house sold in 11 days. A young couple from Seattle. They had a 2-year-old daughter and were expecting a second child in October. When I handed them the keys, the woman asked if the oak tree in the backyard produced acorns. I said yes, every September. More than you can rake. She smiled and said her daughter would love that. I thought of Lily and nearly said something, but I let the moment pass. I moved to Bend, Oregon in the first week of September. Arthur had found a small cabin on the east side of town, just off Century Drive, near the Deschutes River. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a covered porch that faced the Cascades. The rent was reasonable. The air was clean and dry and smelled of juniper and pine. The nearest neighbor was a 1/4 mile down a gravel road. The silence there was different from the silence on Alberta Street. It was not the silence of absence. It was the silence of space. I settled into a routine. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over Pilot Butte. I walked along the river trail 3 times a week. following the path until it curved behind the old mill district and opened up to a view of the mountains. I drove into town on Saturdays for groceries and stopped at a small bookshop on Minnesota Avenue, where the owner, a retired English professor named Dale, kept a shelf of jazz biographies that he updated monthly. I bought one every visit. I read them in the evenings by the wood stove, while Helen's records played on a portable turntable I had set up on the kitchen counter. Arthur visited every other weekend. He would drive the 3 hours from Portland, arriving around noon, carrying a paper bag from the Vietnamese bakery on 82nd Avenue that Helen and I had loved. We would sit on the porch and eat banh mi and drink coffee and talk about nothing important. Sometimes we did not talk at all. Sometimes we just sat and watched the river move and let the afternoon pass without asking anything of it. In October, I received a letter from Megan. It was the first piece of mail she had sent from Coffee Creek. The envelope was plain white, stamped with the facility's return address in the upper left corner. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Dear Dad," it read. "The leaves are changing outside my window. There is a maple tree in the courtyard that turns the most incredible shade of orange in the fall. I think of you every time I see it. I think of Mom, too. I think of the oak tree in the backyard and how she used to sit under it with her eyes closed, listening to the birds. I am reading a lot. The library here is small, but good. I finished a book about a man who sailed around the world alone, and it reminded me of you. Not the sailing part, the alone part, but also the part where he finds his way back. I am finding my way back too, Dad. Slowly. Lily asks about you every day. She still talks about Grandpa Bobby's house. I told her you have a new house now, near a river, and she said she wants to bring her fishing pole. She does not own a fishing pole. I love you. Megan." I read that letter 4 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it inside the cover of the jazz biography I was reading, and set it on the shelf beside Helen's records. It stayed there, between Duke Ellington and Thelonious Monk, for the rest of the autumn. Megan was released from Coffee Creek on January 15th, 2025, after serving 14 months. I drove to Wilsonville to pick her up. Arthur offered to come, but I told him this was something I needed to do alone. She walked out through the front gate at 10 in the morning. She carried a small duffel bag over one shoulder. She wore jeans and a green jacket I did not recognize. Her hair was shorter than I had ever seen it. She looked thinner. She looked older. She looked like someone who had been taken apart and put back together, with fewer pieces but stronger joints. Lily was in the back seat. I had picked her up from the shelter's transitional housing program the night before. When Megan opened the rear door and saw her daughter, she dropped the duffel bag on the pavement and knelt down. Lily threw both arms around her mother's neck and said, "Mommy, Grandpa Bobby's house has a river and I am going to catch a fish." Megan laughed. It was the first time I had heard her laugh in over a year. The sound filled the car, the way sunlight fills a room when you open the curtains after a long night. We drove to Bend together. The 3 of us. The highway stretched east through the Cascades, past snow-covered ridges and frozen waterfalls and stands of Douglas fir that rose like cathedral columns on either side of the road. Lily fell asleep in her car seat somewhere past government camp. Megan sat in the passenger seat, with her hand resting on the dashboard, watching the mountains go by. "Dad," she said quietly, "somewhere near the summit." "Yes, thank you for not giving up on me." I kept my eyes on the road. The snow was bright against the dark trees. "That was never an option," I said. We arrived in Bend just before sunset. The cabin was warm. I had left the wood stove burning low before I left that morning. Helen's records were stacked beside the turntable on the kitchen counter. The porch light was on. Lily woke up when I opened the car door. She looked at the cabin, then at the river, then at the mountains turning pink in the last light. "This is it?" she asked. "This is it," I said. She took my hand and Megan's hand and walked us both to the front door. I went to New Orleans in March of 2025. Not by train. I drove. Megan wanted me to fly, but I told her I needed the road. I needed the hours behind the wheel, the passing landscapes, the slow transition from one world to another. Helen and I had always talked about driving across the country together. We never did. But I could still do it alone. And in doing it alone, I could carry her with me in the only way I had left. I left Bend on a Tuesday morning. Lily stood on the porch in her pajamas and waved with both hands. Megan stood behind her, one hand on Lily's shoulder, the other holding a thermos of coffee she had made for me. She had moved into the second bedroom of the cabin in late January, after her release. The three of us had spent the winter together. Quiet mornings, slow dinners, board games by the wood stove while snow piled against the windows. It was not the life any of us had imagined, but it was the life we had been given, and we were learning to hold it gently. The drive took 4 days. I followed Highway 97 south to Klamath Falls, then cut east across Nevada and through Utah. I crossed into Colorado at Grand Junction, turned south through New Mexico, then east through Texas and into Louisiana. I stopped at small motels along the way. I ate at diners where the waitresses called me honey, and the coffee was always too hot. I listened to Helen's jazz records on a portable speaker I had placed on the passenger seat. Miles Davis through the desert, John Coltrane through the mountains, Billie Holiday through the long, flat stretch of eastern Texas where the sky was so wide it made me feel both insignificant and free. I arrived in New Orleans on a Friday evening. The air was warm and thick and smelled of magnolia and river mud, and something sweet I could not identify. I checked into a small hotel on Royal Street, 3 blocks from the Mississippi. The room had a wrought iron balcony overlooking a narrow courtyard filled with ferns and a single fountain that trickled water over mossy stone. I stood on that balcony for a long time, listening to the city breathe. Helen and I had honeymooned here in 1983. We had walked these same streets. We had eaten beignets at Café du Monde, and powdered sugar had landed on her nose, and she had laughed so hard she spilled her coffee. We had listened to a trumpet player on Frenchman Street who played with his eyes closed, his body swaying, as if the music were something physical that moved through him like wind. We had stood on the banks of the Mississippi at sunset and watched the water carry the last light downriver, and Helen had said, "Bobby, promise me we will come back." I had promised. It took 42 years. On Saturday morning, I walked to the French Quarter. The streets were already alive. Musicians on corners. The smell of chicory coffee drifting from open doorways. I walked past Jackson Square, where artists had set up easels along the iron fence, and past the cathedral, where pigeons gathered on the steps like small gray parishioners waiting for the doors to open. I walked until I reached the riverfront. The Mississippi was wide and brown and slow. It moved the way time moves when you stop trying to measure it. Barges drifted downstream. A steamboat sat, docked near the moonwalk, its white paint gleaming. I found a bench facing the water and sat down. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out a small velvet pouch. Inside was Helen's wedding ring. I had kept it in the drawer beside our bed for 2 years after she passed. Then I had moved it to the velvet pouch and carried it with me to Bend. It had been in my nightstand ever since. A small circle of gold, worn thin on the inside from 40 years of wear. I held it in my palm and looked at the river. "I made it, Helen," I said quietly. "I am sorry it took so long." The wind came off the water and touched my face. It was warm and soft, and carried the faint sound of a trumpet from somewhere in the quarter. I thought about everything that had brought me to this bench. The diagnosis, the long goodbye, Tyler's betrayal, the train I never boarded, Sam Okonkwo's hand on my shoulder, Arthur's steady presence, Megan's notebook, Lily's drawing of a house with a big tree, the courtroom, the sentencing, the letter from Coffee Creek, the drive across 6 states with Helen's music on the passenger seat. Every moment had led here. Every loss, every revelation, every act of cruelty, and every act of courage. They had all converged on this bench beside this river in this city, where a young couple had once stood with powdered sugar on their faces and promised each other forever. I closed my fingers around the ring one last time. I felt its weight. I felt its warmth. Then I leaned forward and extended my hand over the railing. I opened my palm. The ring caught the sunlight for a single second. A brief flash of gold against the brown water. Then it was gone. Carried by the current, moving south toward the Gulf, toward the open sea, toward whatever comes after we let go of the things we love. I sat on that bench for another hour. I did not cry. I had done enough crying. Instead, I watched the river and thought about what I had learned. I learned that the people closest to you can carry secrets heavy enough to crush them. I learned that silence is not always a choice. Sometimes it is a cage. I learned that evil does not always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a man handing your wife her medication and saying, "Here you go, Mom." I learned that courage does not always look like courage. Sometimes it looks like a woman hiding a flash drive inside a toy piano while her hands shake. I learned that strangers can save your life by simply paying attention. And I learned that forgiveness is not a single act. It is a practice. A daily decision to set down the weight and pick up something lighter. I flew home from New Orleans on Sunday evening. When I walked through the cabin door in Bend, Lily was sitting on the floor in front of the wood stove, drawing with crayons on a large sheet of paper. She looked up and said, "Grandpa Bobby." I drew the river. I looked at the drawing. It was a wide strip of brown crayon with a small gold circle floating in the center. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the circle. "That is Grandma Helen," she said. "She is swimming." I knelt beside her and pulled her close. Over her shoulder, through the kitchen window, I could see the Deschutes River catching the last light of the day. Megan stood at the counter, slicing bread, her back to me. The portable turntable played something slow and warm. A saxophone. Helen's favorite. The music filled the cabin. The river moved outside. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence between the notes did not feel empty. It felt like home.